I will start by thanking you all for being here. I'll open the meeting. We are a select board meeting joint with the bylaw, ad hoc bylaw committee. I'm not sure that you guys have a quorum.
No.
And FinCom is here as well. Alex, I think you guys have a quorum?
We do.
Okay. Thank you for joining. We are being recorded live on Zoom and local access cable television as well for live, as well as broadcasting there and YouTube and all of our other social media outlets and everything. If we can start with the pledge and then we'll get right into it.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We're a 4-member board tonight. Our 5th member may be joining on Zoom or in person at some point. And I want to thank FinCom for coming kind of last minute. We were going back and forth. We have some questions about the FinCom bylaw, and so we were kind of going back and forth if it made sense to have that conversation now or at a later date. So I appreciate you all entertaining us tonight. So having said all of that, Peter, we are in FinCom land.
We are. I just want, do you want to go back over some of the proposed changes, or do you want to just move forward?
I think we have some questions that we had talked about as a board that might be beneficial with FinCom here. So is the board amenable to kind of reviewing those and kind of discussing our questions?
Yeah, I mean, they came in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just gonna, at 6:07, call the FinCom board to order as well.
So I think some of the, Peter, you may have better notes than I do, I'm not 100% sure. One of the questions that we had was under, do you have access to the FinCom bylaw? Do you guys? Okay, I wasn't sure what you had or didn't have.
It's the same access everybody has.
Okay. Was under S3 members, Part B vacancies. There was questions about the kind of first subsection under B vacancies. And I think, Peter, do you have notes on it? We had questions. It says the committee shall fill by majority vote any vacancy in its membership. And we were questioning the especially under Part C where it says such interim appointments not be ratified by the select board. What the conversation was in the previous meetings that the ad hoc bylaw committee had with FinCom as far as why it's a self-fulfilling kind of prophecy with FinCom fulfilling it themselves without any sort of outside eyes on it. And one of the things, and I want to start by saying that we kind of are trying to come at it from a transparency point of view. And a lot of what we hear as select board at the beginning of the calendar year, when we start discussing budgets and everything, is the process in which FinCom is seated and who's responsible for what and everything. So we're trying to create a way that there's transparency among us, but also more importantly to the public. So when people are questioning things, there's a process that everybody feels comfortable with. Is that, Peter, the gist of what I got from my notes?
That, I believe, fundamentally covers it, where initial appointment is by the moderator with ratification by the select board, and vacancies too, if the committee does not have enough people to form a quorum, that the moderator again appoints, and again with ratification by the select board. But this middle case has no involvement from anyone but the committee.
That was in the old bylaw, wasn't it?
That is exactly the way it was in the, well, I mean, it's not these words, but philosophically it's the same. And in fact, C was only put in to make it clear that it is just by the committee, just like today. And in fact, 2 is a whole brand new section that we made up because we were concerned that someday too many committee members might not be available any longer. And so the committee made up the fill quorum, but we fundamentally did not touch the intent and content of 1, which is, as I've said already, the committee appoints its replacement itself, and there's no oversight or ratification by anyone else.
And I think, correct me, board, if I'm misspeaking, I think the hope was that there would be some level of, if FinCom is doing the appointing, I don't think this board felt strongly whether it was FinCom or the moderator making those appointments, but that there's another level of ratification, whether it's the moderator ratifies or more preferentially that it's because the select board is ratifying the appointments that the moderator makes in the first place. And the select board is responsible for ratifying any moderator appointed vacancies throughout midterms. And so I think the hope was that there could be conversation that it could be not as a power grab, but just more as a transparency piece, that there was some sort of involvement. And we've talked about ratification not necessarily being a grilling and questioning, but almost like a blessing vote kind of.
Yeah, I mean, I think to put it in layman's terms, there are certain people, included, we've talked about it, we wanna make sure there's a transparent process to make sure we're getting the most qualified people, which again, maybe all of you, I don't know. And not someone's just putting their buddies on the board. And that's, for me anyways, to put it in basic terms, we just wanna make the public comfortable that all these people that are filling these positions are the most qualified people. Again, what are the 70s? You may be the most 7 qualified people in Massachusetts, I don't know. But we're trying to come up with a system, again, it's not about the person, everyone turns it at themselves about the person. It's about the system, we're trying to come up with a system that people can trust. That's why this discussion came up.
So, excuse me, through the board, I'm not sure what the level of interrogation or checking validation of qualifications or how that would be conducted.
Well, first of all, you're not being interrogated, it's just, if you apply for a board, I listen, I think the same for,
I'm sorry.
I think the same for all the boards. If you apply for the planning board, you should have some experience, that's just my opinion.
I'm sorry, I mean, mincing words,
Yeah.
what you're saying is you're asking questions to try and validate whether or not the person is qualified.
Yeah,
It's an
that's
inter-
me, yeah.
It's an interrogation.
It's not an
Call it whatever you
interrogation.
like to call it, but it is what it is. The fact is that how does anybody here know the qualifications of the person that's being selected or proposed?
We don't,
And I think
that's the
that's-
problem.
If I
So,
may-
but wouldn't you think,
May I speak?
and excuse me for jumping in like
Go
this,
ahead.
but
No.
wouldn't you think that it would be the board, the committee, whose job it is to be able to do the work the finance would have a better level of understanding of the person that would be applied? If the committee is bringing forward someone, they're bringing someone forward that has credentials, I would think, just as Randy would do.
Well,
So-
we had to, forgive me for
No, please,
interrupting, I mean, I know I had to submit my
I did the
resume
same
to
thing.
Randy.
yeah.
Yep, same thing.
Well, and I think,
If I may, I chair the CIPC.
Mhm.
Every appointment on there that has to be ratified by the board has to be a letter of intent. Are they interested in it? I gotta submit that. And I have to submit a letter from the chair saying they're qualified to sit on this committee.
Okay.
Guess what we don't get from FinCom or the moderator? So we're being asked to rubber stamp things or not. So if an appointment comes to us with no information, we could just as easily turn it down without qualified information to us. So there's no transparency there to help us make the decision that, yeah, Randy picked a good choice, We just dotted all the i's, crossed the t's.
Have you asked
Now we
Randy
can do
for
our
that
job.
information?
I think if I may, I think one of the conversations that we are also having is looking at either a moderator bylaw or a policy, just so that there is that piece coming from the moderator that if, cause currently we just get the list from the moderator and it's sent to us from the moderator. And again, it's not an individual thing, it's a process thing. We get the list from the moderator without any sort of background information on any of you whom are on FinCom or anyone who has been appointed onto FinCom. And so as members of the board, I think most of us often attend FinCom meetings and we learn the players and everything, and we can have those individual personal conversations with the moderator or whatever. But as far as getting any other sort of information beyond this is who the moderator has selected, we don't get that. So that's a conversation that we will have with the moderator, and we've been talking about how best, whether that's a moderator bylaw or a policy kind of thing. But our big piece, one of our big pieces with FinCom was the self-appointing. I don't disagree that you all probably know a lot of the players in town that have the qualifications that that FinCom would benefit from. I don't think any of us are questioning any of that, but it's that level of transparency and how to streamline it and continue to offer some sort of confidence that we as a board are confident with whom we're ratifying, but also that we can go to the public and say that these are well-qualified individuals.
So you'd be looking for a letter of intent and signed off by a town moderator saying this person sent me a letter of intent and I submit her or him?
Well, there would be a letter of intent that also shows their qualifications. What have they done? How suitable are they for the committee? Then the chairman would send also a letter of his recommendation saying this.
Right.
That's the transparency we're looking for that we don't have.
Well, I've read some of the letters of intent for some committees within town, and it is just, I am interested, and the chair says, yes, we're interested in having it. So
Well, we're trying to change that, that's what this is.
I'm just asking a question. I'm just asking a question. Because that's the thing, I've been here when we've read the letters of intent and they're shown up in the selectmen's packets and it's, you know, Susie Q is interested in joining this and, oh yes, we'd like Susie Q on the committee. Well, if we're gonna change it, then we gotta ask everyone to change. I know all of us have had to submit our resumes to Randy, and usually that does get shared with the board members.
I mean, respectfully, I think putting in for the 4th of July committee is quite a bit different than putting in for your board. Your board is a very important board.
They get to spend money.
I mean, I agree with you. Everybody on a committee should follow those policy guidelines.
So,
2 things, that's all we're asking for. That should be submitted to us so we get an understanding, because we don't wanna say no to somebody that's qualified, but if we don't have information, we don't have a lot to go on.
So from the perspective of process, Randy will, via some method, provide the name of a person that might be interested on the committee to the board. At some point in time, at the end of the town meeting, he makes a proposal for appointments for people at the finance committee. That's already been presented to you folks as to who it is that he's presenting. I'm correct in that, right?
No, we've
Okay.
never received those prior to the meeting.
No.
No.
Yeah, we just find out at town meeting.
We find out at town meeting, so here's the issue we have.
We ratify it usually at our next,
The first meeting after that.
Alright,
Yeah.
but at that point, the committee isn't done. He's making the announcement. The committee hasn't happened until the select board has ratified. The committee, we're not able, correct me if I'm wrong, we're not able to go ahead and do any business at all until the board of selectmen ratifies the committee.
So if I might ask you a question, if I may through the chair.
yeah.
What happens if the moderator announces at the town meeting, these are the people who are gonna be on the finance committee, and then later, we don't approve one of them?
Well, then we're gonna be one
Now he's
shy.
gotta go back and the town is messed up. The town's expecting these, no, we didn't do it, now we gotta correct it. So would it be more advisable to say, we should have that information ahead of time of who he's gonna appoint, so there's no mix-up.
That's, I mean, what does that have to do
I
with
think-
us?
I
But
think
it
that
doesn't-
I think
No,
that
no,
that
but I know
separates
that, I know it's not.
No, I think that separates out the moderator
We're not looking at the
piece.
finance, we're looking at the process
Yeah, it's not
to
you.
avoid conflict.
Okay,
Or,
oh, sorry, what does that have to do with the finance? So you're talking about the moderator appointing the committee members.
The process of getting a finance committee, yes.
We have nothing to do with that.
Who said
The
you did?
finance committee has nothing to do with that.
So to
well, you
circle back,
can't function if the person that was appointed doesn't get appointed.
But that
Now
doesn't,
you're missing a
Again,
member.
what is that?
But that's-
So then you're screwing up our composition at that point.
but I think, if I may, I
We're not
think,
screwing it up.
We've lived
But we
with
have
this.
nothing, the finance committee has nothing to do with who the moderator selects though.
right.
He
I'm-
selects people outside, we don't, I mean, on
No, but-
occasion, he'll call us and ask us for input, but we're not putting forward people's names or anything like
And
that.
we don't reject people. Suzie Q comes in, we're not saying, well, we don't like her, so let's not have her on the board. We have, the moderator will present the people, the candidates for the positions, and then the board gets together once it's, the select board is validated.
Yep.
The committee, then the next meeting, the meeting goes and everybody is there, and that's when we start business.
and so I think,
So, I'm not sure,
if I may, I'd like to circle back a little bit, cause I think that this is where I'm trying to focus on that piece, really that subsection 1 under vacancies, where currently, per the old bylaw, is that if there's a vacancy, but not quorum conflicting vacancy, that FinCom can appoint a person themselves without any sort of,
An interim person, right? So it would only be until the next town meeting,
Right.
Yeah.
it seems like.
yeah.
But if I may, are you saying that you would do that without due process of informing the board?
As of right now, it is not part of the process.
Yeah, as of right now,
And
so if
so
you
I
wanna
guess-
I'm not
change it.
arguing right now,
Has it
we're
ever
talking
happened?
about the future
Yeah.
bylaw.
Did anyone check with Anita to see if it's ever happened?
Well, I guess that doesn't matter, I mean,
That
the
doesn't
fact of the
matter. It could
matter is,
happen.
we should have a proper process
Well,
going
so-
forward.
so let's make it whatever it should be.
Well,
And
and
what
I-
you're
That's what we're
saying
trying
is
to do.
You wanna be able to have that
I don't think
validation
anyone's
ahead of time.
against having you guys
So
ratify.
it was
it.
presented to
No,
us that
I-
it was
listen.
going to be, that it was a challenging sticking point for FinCom
Well,
potentially,
we were told
and
FinCon,
so-
you guys had a problem with it, that's what we were
So
told, so.
that's why,
No,
That's been in the bylaw.
Yeah,
so I
No,
just,
they wanna
Changing it.
change
No,
it to
changing
have-
yeah.
The third thing said that C say such interim appointments need to be ratified by the select board, so take out the not.
I mean, right, when we had this last discussion with Peter and his group, the previous select board had already looked at it and approved it. We went through it and discussed and fine tuned some stuff,
and
so.
wasn't that like a year ago?
I don't, I don't
Oh, it was a
think, I don't
different
think
board
anyone
here.
has a problem with that
Okay.
being
Right.
changed.
so maybe,
That's great.
Yeah, again, we're not, this isn't about any individual,
No,
it's not
it
about the
was.
moderator.
Nope.
Yeah, you guys went way around to just come to that point.
But that
Here's
is
an
what,
easier way to
But
do
then
this.
if you're asking for qualifications and you need to ask for qualifications for any,
Well,
Right.
Committee.
that's besides the point though.
yeah, focus on finance committee, that's what we're talking about, but
I will say though, for qualifications, I mean, what's the qualifications of somebody on the finance committee? What do you guys look for as a qualification for somebody on a finance
I
committee?
don't know, we have to discuss that, we have to determine that.
Well, the problem,
You like the color blue, how about that, should that be a qualification?
Seems
I
like-
mean, my point is,
I like it.
we're trying to improve the process to benefit the town.
And
And-
by making this change, the perception is that it is more transparent and that improves the process.
That's the hope, yeah.
Then,
well, and I think,
So it's easy enough just to change C to such interim appointments need to be ratified.
Yeah.
Changing one word.
I think the problem therein lies though, that if we have 6 people on the committee and we can put forward X person, Y person, Z person, you guys keep denying them for a year, we never do anything.
Right.
So at some point, there could be a crossroads where something has to happen.
It's not that you won't do anything, you won't be at full membership. If there's one member who's
If
not,
we have 6 people,
not
we could have,
ratified,
we
right.
could have a 3-3 on votes.
you could, I'm not saying that can't happen, I'm gonna say that happens. How rarely, how often does FinCom have a split vote. I'm not saying it doesn't, I'm saying it can't. I am saying, however, that you get to continue doing business with only 6 members, with the risk of some motions not being carried because you don't have an odd number of people.
Yeah.
We did it with 6 people for the whole
Right.
budget season.
Yeah.
Does the committee know beforehand anything about the appointee?
Generally not.
Generally not, depends.
There has been times where we have, or somebody have, I know I have in one case, but
And-
it's been not common.
I mean, for me personally, I think that there's FinCom, especially in my mind, is a dynamic group, and there's a lot of different pieces that can make a person a very valuable member of FinCom. And I don't want us to put all the pressure on it, a strong financial background, because I think sometimes not necessarily having a strong on paper financial background, but knowing a little bit of the history of town and the school districts and all of this is as valuable as having that strong financial piece. So I think for me personally, it's not so much about a resume qualification kind of thing, but more what's this person bringing to the committee? And that's the same for any of the boards and commissions that we appoint. It's not, or ratify, it's not that I'm looking to try to say, well, you're not qualified, but what is, obviously, if they've accepted, at this point, it's a ratification vote, it's not an appointment vote, so it's a ratification vote from our board. The individuals are interested in the position because they've been selected by the moderator and have likely some sort of value to the committee and to the town as a whole. And just to hear what that is, I think from a board and public piece is potentially valuable. And so that's where I'm coming at it from. I personally don't intend it to be an interview or we're gonna say no because this person's qualifications are not what I want them to be, but more so what are you bringing to the committee? And that's really my interest.
I still don't like the fact that, we're approving people for all these committees and they don't even come in and say hello. I've never even met some of these people. I think it should be mandatory, but that's something we got,
Right.
I mean, we have people, like you said, send in letters and I don't even know who these people are and I'm being asked to approve
I
it
mean, the
tonight.
night of the ratifications, you
Yeah.
had nobody really here
Right,
for
and
the
that's
night of
all,
the
that's all
ratifications.
we're getting at, it's just communication, transparency, this isn't about a position or, we're just trying to put a system in place that is, people trust and.
So if I'm hearing, you guys would be okay if you're fulfilling basically in part C of B1C, changing it to it would be ratified by the select board, would FinCom be okay with that? Or is that a point of contention?
Do we need to
So
vote on that or no?
So what do you wanna do?
I don't think it matters. I do fear that, well, if it's being ratified when it's selected by the moderator, what's the difference to me?
Well, and that would be my point, that a standard way that happening right now is that the moderator selects, presents, gets ratified, and then we start business. There's no reason to deviate from that for anything, just let's make it all the same. Anytime that we have a one-off, it becomes a problem, someplace, sometime.
Is there any reason why we wouldn't have the moderator fill the interim
Yeah.
role as well?
Well, and that's what I think part of the reason, one of the questions that came up with us, and we kind of were led to believe that it was whether it's because historically it's been FinCom or FinCom felt strongly that it was FinCom's position to do so. I don't know, because that was one of the conversations that we had, was if the moderator is appointing and the moderator is responsible for appointing when there is a quorum reducing, or a quorum issue, then why is the moderator not still responsible for appointing?
I'm talking at the end of the process that the moderator
No,
goes through
mid-year.
to get to the end of the town meeting,
Mid-year,
to the other time, it doesn't matter.
yeah.
As long as you're being consistent with it,
My guess is that this was initiated because probably when it was written, the communication wasn't as easy as it is nowadays.
Probably right, yeah.
But I would also guess that there's a level of trying to make it as easy as possible to get people on
Right.
a finance committee, because I don't think there's a lot of people raising their hand that really wanna be on a committee. So I do, as much as you guys are trying to create a process, and I think that's great, and I think making sure that the best possible people, whatever their qualifications are on the board, I suggest and urge that you not make it difficult, because I think that will reduce overall involvement and make it, less likely people are willing to. Cause it's not like this is a job that we get paid for, so
Oh, wait a minute, we're not?
no. Well, you are, but.
And you get such great accolades too, right?
Joy and happiness that it brings us.
Yeah. Peter?
If I may, I believe that one of the reasons that filling a vacancy is the way it is because of timeliness. Having the committee have to take an action and then talk to the moderator for the moderator to find people. That takes time, and depending upon the time of year, time is critical.
It could, but it could also just be calling the moderator and say, who else, who was the next person that had asked to be on that didn't get
It
on,
is
so hopefully
certainly
that's the
much
case.
easier 80 years after this original thing was written.
And I was gonna say, I think in some ways it's easier because then it's not posting meetings. If it's a urgent thing, then FinCom has to have meetings posted to have the conversation and everything. Whereas if it's through the moderator,
Well, so we would not have a meeting simply because we're down by one person.
Right,
We would go ahead and we would do that.
No, I was just
People-
saying not having a meeting to select another person, so just avoiding one meeting basically.
or multiple, if you are having issue,
Yeah.
but
I
yeah.
think having it not be, having the person not be ratified is fine. It might be worth the initial, like having that be, the initial part of it saying that the moderator would fill the role, the vacancy, and then saying if the moderator can't fill the vacancy, then the FinCom can attempt to as well, or something of that nature. So the primary is moderator and secondary is FinCom. So, yeah, if
So
that
it
makes
doesn't
sense.
delay the process.
Or if the moderator just literally can't and,
So if
for
the
whatever reason we
if the
can.
moderator is on vacation at the time and he's not around, we're not gonna do it anyway. So there has to be a process that says moderator and then select board. And if it's not moderator, who takes over for there isn't.
Or even worse, if I may,
Sure.
there is no moderator.
Yeah.
If that position is vacant. Now, we have a whole problem with the original appointments and with filling quorum and all of that.
Right.
And
well, so
I'd have
if
to
that's
think
the
about
case,
that.
can we say if moderator is unable to appoint somebody, the FinCom can appoint somebody with ratification by the select board? That solves all the problems, solves.
excuse me, Austin,
Yes, sir.
I know that to fill
That's good.
empty positions on elected boards, the select board has a role in that. Does the select board have a role in filling an otherwise vacant elected position like the moderator?
Good point.
I would think so.
I don't know.
I think you have to, cause otherwise how would
Somebody's
business get
gotta-
done at town hall?
I mean,
you
there
know,
is an assistant moderator,
Oh.
so
Yeah, that's
I would,
appointed at town meeting though,
right,
Alright, but it's
just for
the,
town meeting.
but
Just
the
for
assistant,
Randy's not
town
going
meetings.
anywhere, let's be honest.
Well, it's more if they
No,
both
I
get
know,
hit
I'm
by a
just
bus,
kidding,
you
I'm
know,
just
it's
no,
that
but the
whole.
Oh, don't
assistant,
say that.
the assistant is
That's
there.
what the common term is.
Yeah, I know.
So the assistant is there, so there's no Randy, but there still is an assistant. So if Randy's not available for other reason, the assistant can still do the same job, I assume.
Okay, I go back to first primary is moderator, secondary is FinCom by ratification of select board. Sure.
Okay.
Clarification is good, I like that.
Peter, what else, that was the big one, right? The
Yeah, that was the
other,
big one. Hold on, one other, I'm just gonna finish my note.
He's ready.
I've
Because
had people
this is
come
the only way
in,
I'll remember tomorrow.
Tell me about it.
I've had people come in to the committee and be interviewed with the committee present. And then, we will go ahead and make the appointment from there. But it will really be a committee thing that's going to, they all have different questions that they wanna ask and, this type of situation, so. We've done it that way and it's been, I would say, successful for us, but people who have a background in cable and this sort of thing are hard to find. But at any rate, we keep looking, we keep trying, but that's the way it is.
I think, if I may, I think there was one other question that we had for you, FinCom, and it was under members, the timing of appointments, historically, it's been done at the end of annual town meeting. And I think there was conversation among our board as to the timing of that because, would it be better or not if it was done kind of at the end of the fiscal year appointments when select board does all of our board and commission appointments to give the currently seated FinCom time to finish out the fiscal year and then start the new FinCom, newly seated FinCom would start the July 1st essentially. I don't know if there was conversation, I think it's always historically been a town meeting appointment, and I didn't know if there was, from a FinCom perspective, because you're the ones that are in it, if there's value to considering the timing of it or not. In looking at it, it doesn't seem like, it has to be a town meeting. I think often they are done at town meeting, but when they actually are seated, varies, and I think they're not always done at town meeting. Is that correct, Austin and Tamika? I think when we were kind of looking at how other towns
For
appoint
finance committee?
FinComs, yeah.
Yeah, so I know just in the town of Winchendon, for example, we changed it through charter to make the terms of office coincide with the fiscal year.
So, but the job, the FinCom job, technically, or
Bulk.
practically, ends at the end of that town meeting. All the work that we've done, that has been done by that group of people,
Yeah.
culminates with that vote where they say, yes, let's go ahead and do this.
Or no.
We don't typically. I mean, oh no, oh, they say no, they wouldn't say that, holy jeez. But at that end, given that we do miraculously gain the approval towards the end of the fiscal year, we're not gonna do anything really. I mean, there may be
Transfers.
reasons to get this,
Transfers.
well, but so we may
But
do
the nice
that.
thing is that's
we
a good way to kind of wean the new
Yeah.
people in.
We don't
Right.
need to have the people that have been there for a period of time to finish that out. We don't need to.
Right.
So the question would be, what is the prevailing benefit to having the people that want to leave at that point in time stick around until the end of the fiscal year, as opposed to
I would
Bring in
think
new
though
people.
that closing out the fiscal year, doing the transfers would be kind of the end of the term.
yeah, but you're
'Cause you're
looking
involved
at
with
it, you're
the whole
looking
year.
at it as closing out the books for your company.
Yeah, but I'm looking at both.
Yeah,
Cause that
but-
coincides with both, cause that's the start of the budget term theoretically, and the end of the,
Yeah, but all we're doing is just, dotting i's, crossing t's at that point. That's
From
all
one
we're
account to
doing.
another.
We're really not doing anything like we have done in the budget preparation up to that point. So all of that work is done. If there's a significant benefit to changing something from what it was to this, I'd be
I think-
interested to hear it. And
One of my questions was, and I don't remember if it's happened recently, Karen, you probably recall. I know at one point there was strong possibility that we would have to have another town meeting before the end of the fiscal year if the school budget went one way and everything. And so I think that was some of the conversation was, is there value to having in those instances, again, rare as they may be, having the seated FinCom who's been through that entire budget process and been involved in the budget oversight to the town, and then should there need to be an additional town meeting in that time, that it's the
So
FinCom who's.
certainly makes
I'm gonna toss this back to you
Yeah.
guys, because if they move the town meeting and the election to swap it, then it'll be the same thing for you guys.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's the whole thing, so because you guys will have been all part of it, and there is a potential that there would be two of you missing.
Right.
And that, I remember that's why Eddie changed it, so it's pretty much the same thing.
Right.
again, I suppose the old phrase is, if it's not broken,
And I
don't
think-
fix it.
Well, right, and I understand that. I think some of it is in trying to piece out a lot of the with a town administrator in place now, trying to piece out the roles and responsibilities of select board and town meeting, FinCom and everything. is how much oversight, the conversation for select board changing was that going to town meeting is often, with a town administrator in place now, is often less dependent on the five of select board members sitting at the table, as long as there's some sort of consistency there. I think FinCom having the oversight to the townspeople of the budget and the inside knowledge as to this is what happens if it passes or doesn't pass or whatever, even with the town administrator there, is again possibly helpful, but I don't know.
So when is the, just a
Yeah.
question, I don't really know. When is the town meeting officially done? At the end of the town meeting?
Yes,
But
at
it's adjourned.
the final adjournment of town meeting.
Which would exclude an extended session?
No, the final adjournment is after all the sessions.
So-
We're not talking about an extended session,
No,
we're
no.
talking about the need to call an additional town meeting within before, what is it, the September deadline or whatever, if we had to go
If
to
something doesn't
1/12 and
pass,
then,
you have to have an
right,
additional meeting,
right.
right?
right.
Wait a minute, yeah, but hold on. We're talking, the difference here is because we're talking fiscal year, town meeting, May, fiscal year end of June. So we're talking about a 6-week period of time here in which we would have a second meeting that might create a problem. I don't know
Well,
that,
we had talked about that potentially happening this last year, so.
yeah, but I don't think it happened that quickly. I don't think we
No, it would
get
have to, I think
Oh,
it has to.
it would
yeah.
have to because you have to have a budget June 30th.
And I understand it's gonna have to, but, which is why we push it towards getting it done in May.
Well, sure.
In fact, didn't we have that happen 10, 12 years ago when we did not pass the school budget? And in fact, it got turned down by multiple towns, and so all the towns needed a second, well, anyone who had not
Yep.
ratified the budget.
So was that town meeting where was that the end of it? No, it wasn't done, town meeting wasn't done at that point.
No, town meeting was adjourned, and then we had to have another one because of
There
the
was
way
a
the school
whole
budget
So
new
was.
it was a
special town
supplement,
meeting.
it was a
That's a separate
supplemental meeting.
I
Yes.
think they had happened so rarely that I don't think it much makes a difference, and truthfully.
right.
I mean,
If
you're
someone's
talking about-
leaving,
yeah.
if someone's leaving the board, I would say most would come back to help with
Yeah.
training new people.
You're also talking about the minority of the board, right? So we're ever only
Right.
only ever gonna
Right.
turn over 2 or 3 people, which is the minority of the board.
Well, the most
so-
we turn over is 3, cause there's
Well,
no
the
3
most
of
you
you.
turn over is the number of empty seats on the board after expiring terms.
Yeah, but every year there's expiring terms of, is it 3, 3 and 2?
Should be 2.
I think it's two.
Yeah, 2, 2, 3.
Okay.
Okay, so
Right.
to move on, it sounds like that can be continue conversation that we could ask the moderator about, but that historically it's been that way and it's worked well for FinCom, there's no strong am I sensing that there's no urgently strong feelings one way or the other, that it's why?
I don't think anyone has a problem either way.
Okay.
I think there's no benefit one way or the other and no problems one way or the other.
We just need to be consistent.
Right, and and I would argue have rationale for why it is whichever way it is, and I think that's, okay.
She has not been on for long.
And then I think we have not been, I don't think we got much into duties, is that, I didn't mark on this one where we had stopped last meeting.
I vaguely remember some relatively minor changes to 4A that I don't have in front of me.
Yeah, if I may,
Yeah.
the document that I attached to the email for tonight, I documented everything that we talked about last time.
Thank you,
If you need to reference something.
thank you.
I've been reading the finance committee book, the select board book, and all documents. And could you tell me, and this had been brought up before the board, according to this, I get one opinion from the books, from MMA and the legal stuff, of who should be presenting the budget to the town.
Well, let's be careful with the words here, if I may, because MGL says the finance committee shall submit the budget to annual town meeting.
Then,
That's not a question that is not up for debate.
then who develops the budget?
Depends upon your town structure.
Right, that's not codified anywhere, it is.
Well, MMA has a very strong opinion on that. So their opinion is that the organizational structure, the town administrator, the departments, develop the budget and then submit it to the finance committee for their oversight, because they are the oversight committee for the town.
That's what
But
we
it
do.
mentioned, and this is why I'm asking, it mentioned that for one organization, whether it be the TA or the select board or the finance committee, to do both jobs is like asking the governor to submit a budget than asking her to ratify it to the town. So there is a separation of powers there. So I'm just wondering, is that how it's been done in the past? I mean, I'd go to the meetings and I'd listen, but I didn't know the actual function of what there is.
Sorry, what do you mean?
You haven't got
Okay, who develops the budget? The has been done, the TA
So-
with all the departments, the accountant and everything.
Correct,
Then they submit the budget to you?
correct,
Okay, and then it's in your hands after that?
correct.
Okay,
That's how it should happen. Obviously, without a TA, it's happened differently in the past, but that's.
okay,
For
all right,
different
I'm just
TAs, it's happened
Yeah.
differently.
I'm trying to clarify here in my
That's
own
what you
mind.
said is the way it should happen, correct?
Okay.
And we should then present it at town meeting.
Right, cause you are the watchdog, without question, so. Okay,
I think we had, Tamika, thank you for pointing out the attachment. I think we had questions about, it being under duties, part A. That about how much involvement there should be between FinCom and department heads as individuals and committee chairs versus all of that going through the town administrator. And obviously, I think the current practice has been, and I think last year especially, was if there was something big, either a big change or a big request or something, asking the department heads or committee boards or chairs to come in and have a conversation with FinCom. But I think if the town administrator and finance team are responsible for creating, kind of developing and creating the budget and working the working budget, doubling, and they work closely with the department heads and boards and committee chairs, then is it kind of a repeat effort to have them come before FinCom if there's not significant changes?
No, I think we could probably, in the past, we've done it very detailed.
Yeah.
Where they've come and, I think we could probably make it broader and more generalized, but I do think there's a lot of benefit to having the town department heads come, especially the big ones, but really it should be all of them. I think last year we did it based on time and not really having enough
That's
time.
right.
Yeah.
But I think there's value in having them all come, and it's one value of not only, obviously, town administrator is gonna look out for them in best interest and all that, but if they feel like they're not getting what they need, they can take the second step and go, to us as well and address that if they feel they need to. They probably shouldn't, but God forbid they feel like they have to. So there's that level. The second level is making sure that the finance committee is fully on board and understanding what everyone needs, what everyone wants in their budget, so that it can be relayed to townspeople whenever we're asked or whenever it's brought up. We have fully detailed information. We're not just reading a pamphlet that tells us, hey, we're getting these 10 things. I think having that conversation, and if we can do it in an expedited manner, where it's not a huge drain on all resources, I think it's helpful. I think in the past, there's been plenty of times where it's been overdone. But I think that that's also because of lack of
staff
TA.
support or staff support or
So,
whatever.
you know, hopefully this will be better going forward, so that's, I think it's helpful, but I think it'll be more broadly talked about going forward.
At a higher level.
Yeah, cause I don't know, I don't know how I feel about that, only because I think the town administrator is responsible for running the town and the departments. I think it should funnel through him, personally. Unless the department head with the town administrator, you know what I'm saying? I don't like the idea of going around the town administrator.
I don't know if it's around
I'm not saying they
Yeah.
should, but I'm
Yeah.
saying if they feel like they're not getting if they feel like they're not getting the support, it gives them an opportunity to go forward somewhere else.
I
Or
like
an opportunity to what? The finance committee doesn't have any authority,
No, we could change the budget if we wanted to.
but I mean, you're giving,
If a department was not, if the department head was talking to Austin and said, I need this and this and this, and he said no, the department head comes to us at that town meeting, at the meeting and says, you know, this is what I've talked about with the town administrator, but really I need X, Y, and Z, then we could make the determination that they do need that and we could add that to their budget.
I think it's helpful.
I'm not saying it will happen or it should, but I think
Yeah,
there's
I don't
the
like that at
possibility
all.
that that could happen.
Well, in a tight budget year, it's nice to be able to talk to the department heads to hear from them what they really need.
Yeah, and I guess I don't necessarily disagree that having some input, like that there is value to potentially having a department head come in. But also I think where we're struggling, and this is kind of going down to part C, I'm kind of skipping around a little bit, but the committee shall submit the proposed budget at the annual town meeting. That's what MGL says, but we were proposing that it's the town administrator's proposed budget because again, trying to piece out the roles and responsibilities of town administrator versus FinCom and how that delineation is, looking back at past historical practices, at the town administrator position is fairly new in the scheme of all of this. So how it's happened in the past iterations of town administrators, as well as how it would could effectively be managed going forward. And a lot of the frustration that we, I think, have heard from the public as well as just on us as a board member has been kind of the back and forth between it's our budget, it's that budget, it's that budget, it's this budget, and
we shouldn't have that now with the appropriate person in that office.
Right.
well, and I
But we
think
have had some instability in that office
and
that has created that.
And I understand that, and I'm just trying to look at it from a bylaw perspective, and I've said that, I've sat up here and said that again and again and again, that puts the onus on us as select board members to be aware of the person for which we're hiring that position, all of the roles and responsibilities that position is going to entail, and whether it's a full-time or an interim or whatever, there are roles and responsibilities, and maybe that also needs to be,
So if town administrator is proposing the budget at annual town meeting, which I think you said is not allowed.
So this is, I think, the words of semantics, is that MGL says that the FinCom has to submit the budget at town meeting, is that the correct verbiage,
Yes.
Peter? And the question was, what does the submit, like, it just says town meeting, or the budget, it doesn't say whose budget, it doesn't say.
Right.
So that, and what does it mean to submit? Does that mean that you take, let's say you take the town administrator's budget, that you, as FinCom, who is responsible for vetting, I think, vetting things to say to the public, yet that this is an upstanding use of funds or not, and you don't, you submit the budget and then say, have the motions to change, or are those conversations happening before and it's a joint budget? I would think would happen before, and it would be a joint collaborative budget.
Joint would be great, of course.
Right,
That's what we all want. I don't think anyone would disagree with that.
right.
But I think the problem comes in if you leave that open So let's say that there's disagreement between FinCom and the town administrator. When we get to town meeting, who's getting what number put in?
Alright, so the process isn't, well, first off, it's not our budget, it's not Austin's budget's not yours, it's the town's budget.
Right.
It's the town's, but so you take the personalities out of it, it's the town's budget being presented by a group chartered to do that, to make the presentation. It's the finances committee to recommend approval or not. And so if there's a disagreement between what the content of the budget is, it would be the finance committee responsibility to recommend approval or not. I think it's just a matter of creating process. Who does what? And I look at it as being the department head. I see Nick making the budget,
Austin.
presenting it to Austin.
Oh.
Austin then takes that and brings it into us. We have the conversation, there's a discussion, and maybe there's some pushback, but when it's done, it comes to you guys and it gets approved for the warrant.
It goes to the town meeting for approval.
It doesn't get on the
Doesn't get
warrant,
approved by the
It doesn't
select
get
board.
approved by the select board.
but
It goes,
it's gotta get on the warrant.
the warrant articles are standard warrant articles.
Alright, but
yes.
it has to get on the, so it's not getting approved, it's being presented to you
yes.
for inclusion on the warrant, let me put it that way. And then that's the vehicle by which the people in the town meeting find out what the numbers are. And that's what it is, and if we can be consistent with that, have a standard policy or process for that to occur, and then be consistent with it, and not worry about
So,
the guy who
The
comes in and
reason
says,
we've
I wanna
always
do it
had the
this way.
finance committee budget is because that way the town knows that the finance committee made the change from what the town administrator said.
Right.
That's why there's always been in theory, that's been the reason. In practice, it's been a lot of getting the budget to the point of being
Well,
finished.
That is also not just the theory, that's what's happened. We've made the changes.
Right,
from the-
because
fit it in,
we
that's
had,
what's gone
because we
forward.
had to get it balanced,
To
yes.
fit it into the.
But the problem goes back to, if you're saying it's a town administrator's budget, who gets final say in the budget that goes to town meeting? I'm just,
According to MGL, you do.
okay,
No.
so.
no,
Yes,
Excuse me, that's
no,
not
they're
correct.
presenting it.
no,
No, it says submit, and it does not define submit. We in the town historically, recently have interpreted that to be that the finance committee makes the motion.
Yep.
Because at the end of the day, that's what the town is voting on.
Right.
But perhaps submit means 4 people are carrying a large
Scroll?
what's
Okay,
that?
well, you could look at however you wanna talk about that. Submit to me means it's our responsibility to get it to town meeting.
if I might, chapter 39, section 16. The appointment and duties of appropriation, advisory of finance committees, who shall consider any and all municipal questions for the purpose of making reports or recommendations to the town.
Right, and that is,
Right.
that's actually
Another one of the duties.
D.
Yeah.
Committee shall discuss its recommendations on warrant articles received from the select board and report thereon to town meeting. That's what that is. That's nothing to do with the budget,
No,
other than the fact that the budget is another
but
warrant
you're
article.
my point was they're presenting the budget to the town, so they have to make the recommendation reports to the town on the budget.
So are you equating recommendation to justification?
No,
Okay. So all you're saying is somebody has to sit in the chair at the mic and read what's on the warrant document.
right, of everything I've read, the understanding I have, and if I'm
That's
wrong,
me, I'm
somebody tell
sorry.
me please. The understanding I have is once the budget has been submitted to the town,
Yeah,
okay, then you have oversight on that budget, which means you have to comment, make recommendations on that budget to the town.
right.
Right.
That's,
So if that's the case, if we're the final one saying it, we should have the final say. Now, I'm not saying that, again, the all hopes is that this is a cordial, collaborative thing and that town administrator gives us a budget and we say, yup, looks great, we bring it to town and that's what we go with.
well, that's never gonna
But
happen.
God forbid, there's a battle royale, someone has to have the last say and we need to make sure that that is documented, whoever has, and I'm not saying it has to be.
No,
us, I'm not
I
saying it has
agree
to
with
be
you
TA,
100%, but this
just
is
saying
my
we
only
need that on
fear,
paper.
Harry.
Well, no, there's one more part
Yeah,
to
go
this. If we don't like it, the town administrator board can make a motion to change that on the town floor.
Yep.
So, yes, you can make recommendations, but if that doesn't fly with us or the town, we still have the right to make a motion to change the number.
Any citizen can always make a
Right,
change.
Perfect.
My point, so
Yep.
there is that fallback if we disagree on the town floor. And hopefully, this year, we'll have more cohesiveness between the finance committee, the select board and the TA, where we won't get to that point.
Yeah, I mean, I think just one of my fears is, and I'm thinking, we're all talking worst case scenario, which
That's
probably
what
will.
policies are for, though.
Right, which will probably never happen, but my only fear is we've hired a town administrator to run the departments, to run the towns. And again, I'm gonna use an outrageous scenario, but knows somebody in the police department or fire department, they need equipment, they need money, whatever. Town administrator says no. There's a fear that I have that you're overriding the man or person who's in charge of running those departments.
You could say that on both sides, though.
No, I guess you could, but
Town administrator could have a
but that's his
relationship
pay,
with-
that's his job. I
somebody
don't know,
and-
I don't know.
Yeah,
This is where I hope we don't get into that gray
Well,
contest
yeah,
area.
but like you said, policies, we gotta figure out where we're going.
That
with
might be the
this.
reason to have some really specific
Yeah, we need it.
terminology around what happens. If we're looking at development of a budget, what are the steps? What happens first? What happens next? How's it end?
Well, the policy just
Beginning,
needs to
middle, and
state who has final decision. That's really all the policy needs to state. How we get there, honestly, is a internal process that the TA would create, right? That's really the internal process. The policy should be saying, if there's a problem, what do you do?
If I may, if you look at page 10 in the Finance Committee handbook, they show you the budget process. There's 4 things there. First 3 are the select board or the town administrator. The last is the Finance Committee. That's laid out.
And we're hopeful that this year that will occur.
But it doesn't get to
But we've
the,
all, most of us have been through when that hasn't happened.
I think we all have at this point. But and again, a policy has to be there to make sure that there's a fallback when something doesn't go right. That's what a policy is for, and we need to make sure that, and I'm not saying if we wanna go one way or the other, if it's not finance committee, then honestly, what's finance committee's role? Right, that's probably one of the things that needs to be discussed if we don't have that role. But it's
my vote.
It's a lot of time and effort.
Yeah.
In budget preparation, is it part of your duty to transfer an amount from one account to another?
Yes.
in budget preparation.
Yeah. So in other words, you're getting the budget put together. There's money in this account, it's not enough to cover the issue, and you transfer it to another account?
Well, isn't that a,
That's an interdepartmental transfer.
Interdepartmental, yeah.
That's done after the
After the
fiscal
fact.
year.
I think
That's
he's talking about
the budget.
during the budgeting
Right.
process, saying there's a shortfall here and it looks like maybe there's a, and so
There's a shortfall
or a
everywhere.
projected shortfall. I should
Every
say.
account has a shortfall, that's why the department heads lay it out as to what they need. And they go ahead and they say, I want this amount of money, and then it becomes a matter of, parsing it out from revenues.
Well, hopefully during the budget process, we wouldn't know that there's a shortfall already, because hopefully they haven't already spent that money.
That's my point.
That'd be a little concerning if
I mean,
they
we're
spent next year's
in,
money already.
we're in 2023 preparing a budget for 2024. We're not gonna have any shortfalls for 24,
25.
25, whatever the next year is. We're in a situation where we're dealing with things that are going to happen, not we did. We do deal with things that happen, like now, when we're making transfers within the 24 budget,
It's 25.
within the 24 budget. So, and that happens.
Yeah, interdepartmental transfers, honestly, I think we've been doing, but I'm not entirely sure we should be, but that's a different conversation than this, to be honest.
Yeah.
We're also the only board in town that cannot sit on any other board. The 7 of us are not allowed to sit on any other board within town.
For that reason, really.
And we are, and that is to keep us impartial.
I mean, I think that there is value to, I don't wanna say that there's no, I think that there's a strong value to FinCom, and as I view it more with now looking at structure, from working with the town administrator to really vet the budget that the town administrator and team has put together, and so that you as members of town are comfortable saying to town that this is a wise expenditure of your tax dollars, that this is a warranted expenditure of your tax dollars. And less of a, and I think, Karen, to your point, some of it's the growing pains and just historically with the transitions and turnover and turmoil and everything, that it hasn't always been able to happen that way, that it becomes more of an advisory oversight committee to really have the conversations with.
It wasn't even advisory 3 years ago.
Right.
And then even 2 years ago, it was actually going down to the nitty-gritty doing the budget.
And I think, I mean, I will argue also in the past that it shouldn't, in my mind, it shouldn't fall to FinCom to have a budget come before FinCom and say, I did the best I can, and now you have to find $400,000 because that's, or whatever dollar amount, that's not fair.
That's not happening.
I also think that there is value in years that we have to have cuts, to have for the town administrator and staff to have conversations with FinCom, because you're seated as representation of all of town, and so it's that oversight piece, that there's additional eyes on it from town, from members of town, that I don't wanna get lost either. So I think I'm trying to make it less of a ownership thing and more of an oversight, help with transparency thing, I think.
But the honest answer here is that there's just limited money that we're talking about. There's a pool of revenues that come in, pool of demand on those revenues. And now the matter is, how do you manage that to be able to make sure that everybody's getting some portion, because everybody feels that they're not getting their share. Now that's where, unfortunately, or fortunately, Austin is gonna come in. Because now he's gotta be able to make sure that everybody, he understands all of the need. And there's going to be a group that is going to have a more pressing need than another group. And that's the one that he's going to have to bring forward and say, this is why we need to go in that direction. And then we would then agree or disagree, advise for or not,
But like you guys are saying, it's not about the person, it's about the position.
right?
And the position, I think all of us on the finance committee feel a lot better with the current position, better than it has been.
Correct.
So we're hopeful that everything will work out, but in the past, we haven't had a choice. Because if we waited, we'd probably still be waiting for a town meeting.
Austin, if I may, I've been working with you for a short time. I find you very capable. But one of the issues that is kind of the red herring in the room is the Capital Improvement Planning Committee. The capital assets of this town are in terrible shape. Estimates are, from our committee and the roads, is that we're $34 million behind in infrastructure needs. So this year, CIPC has been tasked to not only present a current CIPC budget to you, but also the following 4 years. So you can see what we're looking at to fit into the financial part of you making decisions, which he's gonna submit to you. So that's a big piece of trying to make things work.
We used to get that, And then we fell on really tough times, and truthfully, it became, we didn't wanna waste your time. Sorry, we
No.
didn't wanna waste your time, cause we
No, I
didn't
will
have the
tell
funds.
you, just about everything CIP submitted got approved. But we also didn't submit big numbers.
I
One
know.
year, I think we submitted
We do see your
35.
report, we always see your report every
Right.
year, but the whole purpose was, I know the last couple of years, there were no funds. So to have CIPC come in, there were no funds.
Right, and my point is that you're gonna be seeing for the next 5 years what we're looking at for capital and how it's gonna affect this year's current budget for you going forward. So I'm hoping that's a piece that will add to the information that you need in order to arrive at your budget
Can you
this
get
year,
that
next
same
year.
information from the school?
What's that?
Can you get that same information from the school
We have already.
for 5 years? For what they're gonna spend? Not
Well, what
capital,
they probably-
No, not operating.
Not operating.
cause that's the thing,
But
right there.
capital, they were the first department to submit.
Oh, yeah.
Capital, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, but
capital.
capital's always a dream anyway. And
Well,
there's a
for the
need,
school,
there's a need
the
for things,
sky.
they put it down on paper, and that's the number. What you have as operating expenses are things that are crucial to have.
I will say that 34 million is not even unexpected. I mean, I would wager that if you went to any town in the country, they probably have at least a year's worth of income behind in
Infrastructure, yeah.
infrastructure. And probably any company too.
Roads, bridges, yeah.
I mean, in my experience working with companies, it's been similar to that as well,
Yeah.
about a year's worth.
I mean, it is, but what we find, and I don't wanna digress from this, what we find is a lot of this equipment is 20, 30 years old.
Yeah.
This isn't stuff that's 5 years old that we can make up, no. We've got some roads that have never been repaired properly, that need to be done, so, but that's another issue. My point is that in looking at it, Austin's gonna be given the capital improvement stuff, which he'll work in. And then you'll have information on that, cause all we've been doing from a CIPC perspective is just giving you one item for the year. This time, we're gonna give you 5 years' worth of items to look at.
Peter, do you wanna, I think we've kind of covered the hope in, it sounds like kind of the hope in transitioning to more of a advisory and collaborative oversight than a ownership hands down on the budget kind of thing. Given that in the town administrator bylaw, it's laid out that the town administrator is the chief financial officer and responsible for the budget. And then obviously that piece has to work in consultation for the advisory piece to work, right? I mean, but before making, we were under the impression that it was going to be a little bit more of a challenge to have a conversation with what FinCom's role was now versus forward. And I didn't wanna step on toes and try to make it that we're,
So if there's a problem between the town administrator and what the finance committee says, who gets the say?
Kinda goes,
That kinda needs to be,
Question I asked earlier.
that
well, a
needs to
few
be
times,
stated.
yeah.
well, and I think this is where Austin, I mean, I think I kind of view it as it's the town administrator's budget, and then at town meeting, if it's significant changes, that would be, I don't know. I'm hopeful that there's not significant change, that there's not significant
Think
discrepancy.
back 3 years ago.
I know.
So think back 3 years, think back a year.
I was gonna say, you know, suppose that a town administrator wanted to close a couple buildings.
I mean, there's a
And
bunch of
finance committee
things like
believed that it
that
was the
that
wrong
we
thing
have
to
to
do.
think, you know, you plan for the worst.
Right.
That wasn't that long ago that we had the worst.
Right, and I think some of it is that there's definitely some of the conversation that needs to happen, especially early in the budget process, is not necessarily what comes to fruition at the end. And having the opportunity to have the conversations about, so a few years ago, it was that it was all on FinCom to make the cuts, right? And then last year, it was the staff was putting together options for cuts, not necessarily that anybody wanted, but that they were options for cuts. And so there needs to be some level of forgiveness there, that these are not necessarily ideal cuts and they're not necessarily cuts. And there were conversations that I mean, I was in some of those meetings and looking at numbers. How are we not going to do something without restructuring government, right? Whether that's closing buildings or departments or whatever, when we were looking at those cuts. So I think that there needs to be some level of ability to have those hard and somewhat maybe off the wall idea conversations early in the process to understand what the entirety of options are, and that's where FinCom in my mind comes in as advisory, saying, you know what, like that's gonna be a really hard sell to town. Or we're gonna have to do this to sell it to town. I mean, the work that you and the department heads did to sell the budget and the override to town was phenomenal. And we're trying to make it now so that we as a town are accountable for that override passing, and also going forward, so it's not as hostile as it was.
But again, you have to think of the position, not the person.
Right.
So the thing is, we're all hopeful that this year is gonna be a breeze, because none of us, not one single one of us wanted to be in that position.
Right.
And I know for those of us who've been sitting on the board for years, the last 3 years have been really, really difficult, and we don't wanna go through that.
Right.
But the finances, like the closings, were all very emotional for everybody involved, of course.
Right.
But it's supposed to be, and again, I'm speaking with someone with no financial background, but I would imagine, it's supposed to be a numbers game, right? That's it. It's easy, I know it's emotional, but it is supposed to be a numbers game, regardless of whose decision. But the town administrator is our designated financial chief, financial officer.
And
He runs the town.
And what would happen if we put that way, and the town administrator, which has happened to us, go, I've made all the cuts I can make, that's it.
Now it's up to you.
Well, it's up to the town. Town votes for these, right? I mean,
We
I
have to
think
bring,
that-
we have to bring a balanced budget to the
Right.
town.
Right.
But please, we've hired Austin at the direction of the town, the select board has hired him. If things can't get resolved, you still have the select board to bring it before. I don't think that's gonna happen. I
I'm
don't
not
think you're gonna
saying,
need that.
I'm not saying that. All I'm saying is, you need to think, remember, plan for the worst case scenario, so that we don't all put our buddies on. It's the same thing, plan for the worst. Think back 3 years ago, worst case scenario.
I think we've hired somebody to be a financial chief. That's, I'm
So if he
comfortable.
walks out the door tomorrow and you hire another person that's not as good, or, I mean, again, this is not, you're talking about the person, not the position. You are blatantly
Talking about the
person.
position. I mean, it helps
And you
that
hired somebody that's good, so you're talking
we
somebody.
hired a town administrator.
Right, that's good.
But when
You're talking about somebody.
3 years ago, we had a TA that literally threw up his hands, and it was dumped on the 7 of us to do it.
Actually, there are a few people that aren't here anymore, and they're gone because of that.
It's true,
No, we can't guarantee that's not gonna
No,
happen.
you can't.
and I
We have no
agree,
guarantee.
and that's the
All you
reason
can say
why,
is we are trying to develop a process that'll cover
get
some
it,
of these things.
but that's why we're
That's all.
saying you wanna almost give the finance committee some rights, because if that happens, we have the ability to do it, otherwise, we're coming in and you wanna see a long town meeting, try to do what we did, it was weeks that we had to go through that budget.
I was gonna say, to make the
I
amendments
still
on the
don't
floor.
understand
Worst
it.
case scenario too, so we go to town meeting and we present the budget, or we propose the budget, and then we immediately say we don't agree with it. What the hell would that, like,
Well, you'd have to explain why you don't agree
right,
with
but
it,
like
then it
how
would be up to the
ridiculous would
town.
that be?
Well,
Well, and Peter, go ahead, and then Austin, I think you had
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that because of that situation, the TA bylaw specifically says that he supplies a balanced budget.
And I get it, however, worst case scenario, that doesn't happen, are they gonna walk that TA out? And if they do, then who's gonna do it? I mean, it's a lot of things that you can fling at it that have happened. I mean, we were pretty much without one until right before the last town meeting that we figured out.
So, go ahead, I'm sorry, I'll defer to Mr.
Well, I just have a question about, I'll start with a comment. I think sometimes you have challenging budget seasons. And sometimes, whether it's the selectmen, whether it's the finance committee, whether it's me, we'll have to make decisions that are unpopular, especially with departments. So if I say no to someone, I think there is an avenue to then go to the finance committee and say, well, Austin said no to me because I didn't approve an extra staff person. And then it goes to the finance committee and they say, all right, we're going to decrease the budget for, Becky, if you're listening, this isn't personal. Decrease the treasurer collector's budget, and then you have a challenge that you've had in previous years where you're reducing budgets for some departments without having the full recognition of the impact that it's having on the department's services that are provided. But also, let's say you didn't have a town administrator, especially the handbook that's mentioned and in other towns, sometimes it's the executive assistant. So most of the time, the budget development does roll through the executive office. Now, when you have a town administrator or town manager, you delegate that authority to this position. So I think budget development in most communities is housed in this position or in this office. And it's a collaborative approach, you're working with boards and commissions and you're working especially with town departments. I do think it does become a challenge though when we submit a balanced recommended fiscal year 25 budget and then you start making changes. Because then, especially if you're making changes if you're increasing without identifying revenue sources, you've gotta go through that whole process all over again. First thing we do is develop a consensus revenue estimate, and then we build our budget from there. When you make changes months into the process, especially when you're ready to go for town meeting or ready to go for preparing the warrant articles, that does create a challenge that candidly I don't plan for in this budget schedule that I presented to both of your boards. Like I asked a couple of weeks ago, I think really this conversation, who owns the budget, what's the deadline? My recommendation is, and what I presented to the both of you, is presenting a balanced budget at a joint meeting to both of you boards, and then we have public hearings with the finance committee, with departments to talk about what this budget provides. So it provides for that opportunity for the public to review and for the departments to engage with the finance committee board. But ultimately, you have a final number that's then placed in a warrant article and presented to the selectmen, or select board, and then you're ready to roll for town meeting. That is why I developed the budget schedule the way I did, because in my opinion, that is the best process to make sure that we have a smooth process, a collaborative process, and a balanced budget for town meeting much earlier than probably we've ever had before.
It was always very collaborative with Margaret, our first town administrator. It was very collaborative. She brought everybody in, we went through everything, and I don't think in all the years I've been on the committee, we've ever gone against something that the town administrator has brought. To be honest with you, I don't think we ever have. We've had to cut to make a balanced budget, but that's because it wasn't brought to us
Balanced?
balanced.
Right.
I don't think,
Yeah, we've had some tough years.
I was gonna say,
Couple of years
I
have
wanna
been rough
say,
for a lot of people.
if we've seen a balanced budget, maybe once.
I mean, I never had
Twice.
it, I know that, but I've only been on it for 3 years.
So in previous years, were there forecasts that were presented before the budget?
Nope.
No, okay.
So I guess one thing.
So that should, I'm sorry, Pete.
No, go ahead.
That honestly should prepare you and let you know, hey, because the idea, honestly, before I even get to presenting the budget, I'd like to have a consensus, and in my schedule, I'm presenting to the both of you a financial forecast to let you know based on our early projections on both expenditures. October 1, I'm waiting for October 1, as we all are, to look at what the school enrollment looks like, so we have an idea what the numbers look like for the schools. And then I'd like to have consensus from the both of you. hey, it looks a little tough, looks like the school numbers are going to be a little bit higher, what percentage are you thinking for the budget, right? I know we've never had that before, but that's also a best practice to roll with it, cause I can't just say, 2 sounds great, and then I don't have the revenues to support that.
So to that point exactly, when 2 is the number, how do we know 2 is right? How do we know that it shouldn't be 15?
Well, it's a forecast, you don't know anything.
No, that's not true.
No, it is.
No, it's not. You're telling me that there's no empirical data anyplace that would identify whether or not something
A
that's
perfect
being.
number, no.
No, I'm not saying a perfect number. I'm saying I'd like to be able to know if the number that's being presented is reasonable.
Well, there's there's some things that naturally we can, right? I mean, so if you're talking about Prop 2.5, naturally, there's things that limit our revenue right there. Estimating local receipts, we have to show a tremendous amount of information if we're going to budget higher than any of those local receipt numbers. We're not allowed to budget higher than those. So there's some things that naturally limit our revenue. So 15 would be amazing. I think this may be for fiscal year 24 by adding $2 million to the levy. That may be, it may be a while till we get those kind of numbers again, but
Well, I was thinking more along the lines of the DPW department's number. How do we know that that number that he's coming in with is an appropriate number? You know, I'm not looking, so I'm gonna betray myself. I'm a big metrics guy.
Yeah.
And so I think it becomes important for us to be able to understand that when the DPW guy or the police guy or the fire guy bring in a number, that we can look at it and we can say, yeah, that looks reasonable. Or ask the question, so Nick, why aren't you budgeting more for this kind of thing? And have him explain it. He explains it, we're okay, we'll go. Same thing that goes the other way. You're budgeting too much, why? There's nothing here that would indicate that. That's all I'm saying. That gets us by, that would get me by this whole thing of, do I believe the numbers? Do I like the numbers? What should I do with them? I don't know that's possible. I'm gonna say that up front. Metrics are hard. It's tough to be able to come up with it because the town of Rutland doesn't look like the town of Sterling. So it's tough to be able to do it. All I'm saying, and I'm venting a little bit now, so please excuse the digression here, but it would be good if we had some empirical data that would provide us with some information that says that what the crust that's being made is reasonable. Done.
yeah, so it is a goal of mine in this year's budget to ask departments to include some sort of metrics in their budget requests. Now, I'm not a subject matter expert in DPW, so I can't, candidly, I'm not sure which metrics the department will be including. If they're including the amount of road salt that they purchase and spread each year, that may help you a little bit to talk about the supplies budget, but that may not necessarily totally inform how many guys they need to spread that.
Right.
Or girls. They need to spread that salt, so that is a challenge with data, right?
But Nick does provide some good information. I think Mike Moriarty provides some good information on what he's doing and why.
Yeah, the five of them usually do, the 5 major ones
Yeah, Seth does a good job.
They bring some stuff to us, which is good.
And I don't know if the library would have those kinds of
Well,
things.
this building would be a great, so if we're, and I don't know if they track this, we'll see when they present their budget. The amount of visitors that they receive annually hasn't increased over the years.
Yeah.
So would that support a request?
Yeah.
Or the amount of books in circulation, or the amount of printed copies that they, print materials that they have,
I mean,
the printers, right? So that would inform some things that you can directly tie to your budget request, right?
it would provide useful to the capital folks.
Right.
To be able to know that this building is being used to the extent that it is, and it's in the I'm gonna say a word and it's not right, but in the condition that it is. So, again, that's just me, it's my own personal bugaboo.
And if I may, I think some of that is having the town administrator as chief financial officer provides that entirety oversight of all the moving pieces of town and not just looking at, okay, well, the squeaky wheel is going to get this because they're the squeaky wheel
Yep.
and not paying any attention to other departments that legitimately are in more dire conditions or straits than the squeaky wheel, but
Right.
are not looked at. And so I think that that's some of the rationale for kind of keeping everything through the executive office so that
And an executive officer at a major corporation has to answer to a board of advisors,
right,
a board of directors, or
Right.
something, because they're the impartial view to look at it.
Right.
To see what it is. They can make changes, recommend changes, and then they bring it to the stockholders.
Right.
Same kind of thing. It's different, but it's a much bigger budget than what we've got.
Can we work that budget in somehow?
But that's how it goes. I mean, it's not just one person standing up. The president doesn't do that. There's that intermediary that's there for a purpose.
And we were just talking about the level of transparency, and that's a huge piece of transparency for what is happening in town to have an additional layer of eyes. So I don't want it to come across that I'm questioning that. I just, I think that we have been so focused on, all of us, maybe a little bit of PTSD from previous iterations, and if we can work for what we have in a bylaw, job description and everything for the positions, the staff positions, and work collaboratively with that, then that's, I think, what I'm hoping. I hear your point as far as having the contingency if the executive office were to fall apart and what happens.
So in my opinion, I think I've said this a couple of times already, the two most important things that are on that town meeting warrant are the questions that the moderator asked the select board and the finance committee. Do you recommend or not recommend this budget or this article? If I'm presenting a budget that has, how many members do you have? Seven, 0 to 7, that budget's not passing.
Excuse me.
So that naturally encourages me to have to work with both of you boards and the capital committee to develop an informed request alongside departments that we believe can be, well, one that provides the level of services that the people expect and deserve, and that we think can be passed at town meeting.
So is there anything in the policy or in the, this is a bylaw policy, however you wanna call it. So if there is no TA, there is no, and the TA executive assistant or whoever that would be backup to bring the budget to the balanced budget to the finance committee. If that person does not exist or cannot do it, what happens? That's the one thing I think we need to decide. If depending on who has the final say on the budget, right? So those are the two things that need to be determined and that we have not determined. So I think if we determine those two things, I think we're fine. I think, well, with this point. But I think those are the 2 points on the table that we need to finalize. So the first point is who's going to do it. I think that's, obviously a tough point, right? And if it's not getting done, who does it ultimately lie with, and is that the select board? Which I think it would have to fall back on at the last point. Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
No. I think if we are keeping with the fact that the budget creation is held within the executive office, then that would fall to select board to prepare a balanced budget to submit to FinCom, and then hopefully, to Austin's point, that it goes to town. We have those discussions, and probably in full disclosure, I'm not a strong financial background person, so I would be very need to be more reliant on FinCom's involvement, most likely, and other staff involvement. And that it would go to when it goes to town, the impetus to have a collaborative, cohesive budget is just what Austin said, going to town meeting and having a non-contentious
Yep.
collaborative town meeting.
Yeah, and having everything go perfect is great.
Right,
If budget gets given to us in absolute no balanced budget whatsoever or in crap format, what happens? Period. That's what we need to figure out.
Personally, I don't know if we can figure that out now. There are some things that are gonna happen that you can't prepare for. Like, for example, we wanna make it easy. How about if we take out a key man life insurance on Austin for $2 million? Something happens to Austin, we got the money to take care of the budget. Okay? Now, that's not realistic.
I checked my car on the way out there.
That's not realistic, but there are some things, you know, there's an old saying that when you plan for war, it's good for the first minute of action. After that, you gotta play it by ear. So I don't know how many of these things we can put into place
Harry,
that says if this
it's the
happens.
last 3 years.
Yeah, I do agree with you, there needs to
It's
be,
been the last
whatever it is
3
we
years.
decide, it's gotta be,
There has to be a final,
It's
and
gotta be
respectfully,
determined,
I 100% disagree. And when you're designing a policy, the point of a policy is to
Worst case scenario.
look at every possible outcome that can happen. Now, you're right in saying that there's gonna be things that you can't plan for. But to say you can't plan for things when you know that there's something that's potentially could happen is the opposite of a policy.
No, that's not what I said. What I said was, you can plan all you want. And if you plan for war, it's good for the first minute. With all the planning that you've done, things are still gonna go a mess. So at that point, there's no more planning. You have to make decisions right there to get things done. And it could fall to the select board. But that doesn't mean, no, that we can't plan for things ahead of time. We can't try to, if something happens to Austin, maybe it does go to us. It has to, basically,
Okay.
because we're the one that appointed him for this discussion. And if we have nobody,
So if TA office is owning the budget and it does not get done, it goes to the select board to be finalized. Now, that's not saying that the finance committee is not gonna help or anything like that.
right.
in
But
collaboration, right?
At the end of the day, if it's going to be with the TA's office and the TA does not do it, it goes to the select board.
I'd say that's the way it should probably runs.
Austin,
In an executive, format.
in your experience, do you know what the contingencies are and how other towns handle it? I mean, so I think the way I would like to see things move is more towards a finance team kind of overseen by the town administrator. So if there is something that happens in that office, that there's still a team in place that is well-grounded to be able to bring forward information, probably with, I would
We delegate. that,
imagine,
yeah.
right, I would imagine more, maybe a little bit more oversight from select board, but not that it's the select board having to create something from the start. I know in the past, and I'm trying to learn from our past and make sure that what we're saying is realistic and attainable for the future.
I mean, if anything were to happen to me, whether it's a leave of absence, health, whatever it is, you'd likely appoint an interim or acting town administrator that would be doing the job anyways too. If you didn't, I'm not suggesting this, cause I don't think any of you would want the job either. There's some towns that have had their, one of their selectmen, like the chair or something, acting as the administrator or performing the day-to-day duties of it, but most of the time you'd have an interim or acting anyways.
So I guess if we look at scratch, we don't have a budget right now and something happens to you. That's one issue.
Yeah, you're still responsible. If I don't do anything, if I forget to sign payroll or if whatever, I'm acting on your behalf.
Right. You're the agent.
And if you start the budget process and you have things in place and something happens to you, then the process has already started for us to look at,
Hopefully.
okay? So the other scenario is you complete the budget and you send it to the finance committee. So in worst case scenario, it falls to us to make a decision what to do, if I'm mistaken. Otherwise, it falls to us to pick up the pieces of where you were and then work with the finance committee on those pieces. Try to get it going.
Okay, so I'm gonna bring up something that everyone here is already telling me not to, but I'm gonna bring it up anyway. So 3 years ago, it was very well known that it was dropped in the lap, and the select board at the time did not assist.
May I ask you a question?
We had joint meetings and there was conversation on those joint meetings with,
Well, so whether that happened or not in the past, the whole point of this bylaw is to say that
Right.
going forward,
this is
Right.
where
This is what
responsibility
But what I'm
falls.
saying
Steps,
is,
right.
again, you gotta make sure that that's the feel of this select board, is that gonna be the feel of the next select board? I just wanna make sure that we know who's doing what.
Right.
And
Well,
then make sure that anyone that comes in understands what it is.
And I think, and I don't disagree, and I think to your point, if it's in, creating it and putting it in the bylaws is going to spell out what happens, because
they can change
before,
it, right?
we
They can
were-
change it.
Yeah.
Town
Right.
can change it, yeah.
before it was a job description of the town administrator, and there was no, and historically, beyond that, it was FinCom doing it. And so there was a lot of, and I think that that's part of the reason we're having a conversation, is so that we can collaboratively understand what has worked, what hasn't, and how it should look in a bylaw form.
Before we had a TA, it was a select board at the finance committee that would sit down and put it together. That's how it was done before we had a TA.
Yeah.
We'd work collaboratively every single year and work to get it done. Then we got our TA. And then the first TA did it, brought it to us, we worked with her and got that finished.
So then I would say that then it would fall back to what we just talked about, that it would ultimately be the select board if,
TA's gone.
right,
And for whatever reason,
Right.
TA role is gone.
Right.
Assistant person who could possibly do it is gone.
Right.
It falls, at the end of the day, it falls to the select board to get it done.
If I
If-
may, can we
Well,
can I ask
consider
a que-
adding something to the select board bylaw that specifically states in that event, it is the responsibility of the select board to do that, so that we can't have those situations where we don't have a future board that just says, I'm not gonna, it's not our responsibility,
mean,
we're not gonna do it, you do it.
Probably worth putting in the TA where it says like the TA will bring a balanced budget. If they cannot, it falls back to the select, whatever.
What is
Yeah.
and who's the,
Well, I mean, so, I think some good language would be perhaps that the TA presents a proposed, or what, we can work on the language, operating budget to the select board and finance committee, and then after a certain amount of time, it's the responsibility of the select board to then transmit the budget to the finance committee, and then it's in the finance committee's capacity as the advisory committee to town meeting to formalize their recommendations
I like that.
for the town meeting warrant.
I like that.
So then there's that
Wording
actual
obviously
kind of
can change.
transmittal.
Peter, did you write that down?
So let's say, for example, let's say it was my responsibility, and I'm just coming up with numbers, 100 days before town meeting to give it to the both of you. And then 60 days before town meeting, it must be transmitted to the FinCom. That would likely give plenty of time, well, that would give definitely plenty of time to both of you and me to develop a budget, consider the budget, and make recommendations or any proposed changes to that budget. You still, if it's 60 days, that's still, 2 months before town meeting.
Is that your major concern?
Just making sure that there's a
worst case scenario
worst case
plan.
scenario planning. There is a direct, obvious responsibility line of who's responsible for what, yeah. absolutely.
Yeah, it needs to be clear, it should be clear.
Okay, disagreement?
I mean,
And
from
also-
what you're telling me, I haven't been involved, so the history has a lot of PTSD to it. So I'm trying.
Recent history,
Huh?
right? Recent history, right?
I want, all the boards, I believe, we wanna clean that up. We wanna make operation between us and the finance committee as smooth as we can get it. There'll be issues, obviously.
Yeah.
But then the big mountains don't need to be there.
Yep, I think everyone would prefer to be an advisory committee, and then we make recommendations to the town based on our conversations and collaborative working with the TA. Any disagreement?
I don't look at it as a fear of the select board, I'm looking at trying to coordinate things and pick up the pieces and make an effort to get everything squared away again.
But I think to your point, Karen, a few years ago, there was not any clear, it was kind of what had happened historically, but there was not any clear,
Well, there was disagreement in the current bylaws on who's responsible for creating the budget.
right,
There still is, cause the new bylaw's not in place.
Right.
So we constantly argue with who's technically responsible for the budget.
right. And it always gets, they're never fun conversations, so it gets emotional and involved and everything. So I think that's, if we can outline it in bylaw form, then
In clear bylaw form.
I feel like that's an oxymoron. But I like your point, Jen, about like making sure that it's clear elsewhere also. Austin, thank you for the kind of line of transmission.
I think it would just be helpful, cause I'm, again, not having been in all the conversations and involved in a lot of the history, it does sound like maybe past boards were not willing to take the onus of that for whatever reason, and just dumping it in your laps and that,
That's a lot of work.
yeah, so,
I don't
you know,
blame them.
whether, you know, like you said, a lot of us don't necessarily have that finance background, so there might be a heavy reliance on your
And that's, yeah,
recommendations,
and I don't think
but-
anyone would be opposed to helping and being collaborative.
Right.
Of course, if the TA can't do it, I doubt that it, but we need to make sure that the select board can't say, well, you know, it's not our job either, and then
Yes.
it's like, okay, well, whose job is it? So
Who's doing
it
it, right?
needs to be defined whose job it is, and then obviously, you know, all hands on deck. I don't think anyone would be disagreement to help, but.
Yep.
No, I
just
agree, it
wanna
should be
make sure.
clear, yeah, there should be a step, there should be steps, clear steps, yeah.
So we're here as volunteers, we're gonna step up when we need to.
What's that? I didn't
We're
read.
here as volunteers,
Oh.
the FinCom. So we're gonna do what we have to.
I thought you said Harry's gonna volunteer. I don't know to what, but that's what I heard.
Yeah.
Well, and I appreciate the work that FinCom does, because it's not easy work. And
Hopefully it is going forward.
Easier,
Easier.
not easy, it'll be easier.
as all eyes go to Austin.
Pizza parties for you
No,
guys,
easy.
yeah.
I think it's gonna be easy going
I
forward.
reinforce, Leah, when I'm sitting in that chair and the finance committee is up there, they don't realize, and most of them never will, what you have to go through to present a balanced budget, and what the town has to suffer or accommodate. So anything the board can do, I think we're all in consensus, to make this a smooth operation again, is we're willing to try. No, none of the stuff that happened in the past. We're a new board. We wanna just look
And
going forward.
there'll be a different board, so that's why I keep bringing it up.
Why you get stuff in the
That's
bylaw.
why we want the bylaws
Want the
there.
bylaws so they can.
Everything we're
No, I get
doing isn't just for this year for these
I know.
bylaws. It's for the future boards that will be here, future committees that will be here. That's what we're ultimately.
Trying to make the town work, that's all.
Trying to make the town work better.
So based on this conversation, the 2 points that I had was who has final say and who ultimately has the responsibility of creating the budget. So in this case, it's both of those things is going to be the TA with recommendation from the finance committee.
I think that's what I'm hearing.
Yep.
Disagreement?
Nope.
Anyone? Other comments? Okay.
Disagreement?
Reconsider, I'm just kidding.
I heard a motion.
Door
Is
closed.
there a second? But you're not even attending.
Then, Peter, does that, I think, and then I think the next ones were per MGL, it's the transfer, the reserve fund transfers, which I think we just realized was solely, a few years ago, was solely a FinCom responsibility. I think it historically had been both a select board and FinCom, but MGL is it's clear sits with FinCom, so that's in there also.
That was that same TA that had that mix-up.
Oh.
Yeah, do you wanna go forward then?
Sure. The other things are straightforward, carry on. You have to report at town meeting on every warrant article, we've already talked about that, and you need to have a section in the annual town report. Nothing new about any of that. Good. Other things that carry forward from the current bylaw, committees given access to books and records and accounts and files, bills and all of that. And officers and committees of the town shall furnish the committee with facts, figures, etc., so that you can make your recommendations. New section. Those of you who paid attention way back when to the appointed committees article, there is in that a way to remove a member from the committee, but remembering that this committee is appointed by the moderator, we needed to say special things about member removal here. The same basic function we believe, the committee believes should exist, where there is a process to remove a member for cause. So, committee members may be removed for cause following the process defined in Chapter 1, Article 2, Section 5. The responsibility ascribed to the appointing authority in the removal proceedings shall be performed by a joint body composed of the select board and the town moderator. So yes, with a fully formed select board and a moderator, that is 6 people. So it's possible to tie. In that case, if it's a tie, the person isn't removed. But one would hope that if there is a removal proceeding, the reasoning is so strong that it would effectively never be a tie.
And I think that that's in line with what we briefly talked about, the appointing for the town, the planning board, fill-in or what,
The associate member.
yes, the associate member was just including select board and the appointing authorities in the removal, just
Yep.
as an additional perspective.
Right.
And in this case, I think especially because moderator, the appointing authority is one, I think.
Yes, we didn't wanna put a decision like this in the hands of a single person.
Right.
Always spread the blame.
And
I think when you originally brought it to us, it just said the select board, and I know I fought
It
to
may
have the town and the town moderator. As he brings us forward, he should be part of it.
I was gonna say, I think it makes sense for the appointing,
Yeah.
the appointing group to be.
He brings us forward, so he should be there to.
No, I appreciate that, thank you.
And that is the end of FinCom.
So if I'm, before FinCom skedaddles, did you guys have any other major issues with any of the stuff that we had talked about? I don't know how much of the meetings you've watched or seen, but we're trying to do this collaboratively and not, as, you know, to everyone's point, looking forward, and get in place of what we should be doing. So.
You're here, go ahead. Karen looks like she's gonna
I
fall
know.
out of it.
Karen's like ready to
I'm
go.
a taxpayer, I'm not speaking on terms of, I'll be speaking as a taxpayer on the floor, so don't worry.
Okay.
Okay. For our board, I think that's the end of the FinCom bylaw, so.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you for coming, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is a good meeting.
7:54.
Just for our board, we have about 5 minutes before our 8 o'clock deadline. Do we want to move forward, or do we want
Absolutely
to
not.
consider more?
Well, what's the next one? CIPC, the one I have listed?
We're not gonna get anything done in 5 minutes.
There's just one or two things to do. I've already been through it.
Yeah.
But we can hold it, cause there's only like one thing, and that is we need to change the $10,000
threshold to
to
25.
25. Other than that, Everything looks good.
So then, do we want to take, because we have our regular board meeting on Monday night next week, do we wanna take a look at our schedules between now and Monday and look at potential additional times for more because it's looking like we're probably gonna be looking towards the beginning of February for our bylaw meeting, town meeting, and not the end of February or beginning of March. So just as far as timing and everything, we have a few more to go through for sure, and then I think there's a whole host that maybe we wanna just not necessarily have a joint meeting, but do our own reading, and if there's anything of major concern, bring it before.
Harry knows, I'm available by phone a lot of the time.
So we have been, we've been doing either the off Mondays or Wednesdays. Neither is great for me personally. Mondays are a little bit easier than the Wednesdays, but it's a big time commitment for all of us, and so I wanna spread the uneasiness.
So we have October 2nd is our next meeting, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And when's the one after that?
16th.
9th is a holiday, so
16th, okay.
we would not do the 10th because that's gonna push, that would be usually we don't do Tuesdays because it's planning board and conservation, they alternate.
Yeah, planning board.
Yeah, it'll be planning board that week.
So I don't know if we wanted to look at a Wednesday, we could look at the 4th or the 11th. The 4th would be a 2-meeting week. Yeah, the 11th would be 1-meeting week.
I mean, out of those two, the 11th would be better for me. The Wednesday, the 11th.
For our next one?
For our next bylaw meeting.
Yeah, Wednesdays are okay with me.
Does that work, Jen?
Of course, that's without verifying with the boss, so
Right.
hopefully it's gonna be all right.
I mean, if it's this far out, we have it tentative.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's, Wednesdays are not good for me, but.
Oh, they're not good for you, I'm sorry.
No, it's fine because Mondays aren't much better, so I will alternate the pain of it all. So we can do, because with the holiday there, we can do the 11th. Does that work for you, Peter?
Yeah.
So we'll tentatively schedule the 11th. Austin, are you available? Tamika, I know your Wednesdays are iffy, so
Yeah, I won't be available.
would you be able to do the recording or should we plan?
No, I'll take care of the recording so that Jen can, participate in the meeting.
Thank you.
Definitely.
I appreciate it, cause I think it's helpful to not have to take notes and.
Yeah, I get it, absolutely.
Thank you.
Going forward with the bylaws we have left, are there any as we go forward? If our regular meetings are light, we could get rid of, a couple of them there, or one at a time. I won't say now, but I'm just saying in the future is, rather than trying to schedule more meetings, trying to get one or two done if it's not a hard one.
Yeah, I'm just going to the.
I'm thinking of maybe revolving funds.
Revolving fund, there's nothing to look at. It was passed at the last town meeting. There's
Okay.
nothing, there's no change.
I mean, I do think that, I'm hopeful that we can have that we're winding down on our extra meetings and that we can fit in anything,
Right.
but, I think that having one or two, cause I think we have a couple outstanding questions for some other ones still also, we've cleared up a lot of them, but, that's my hope.
No, we do need extras, I
So easy ones should be in legal affairs, Articles 2, 3, and 4, licenses and permits of delinquent taxpayers, public consumption of intoxicating substances, which you really should review, but I don't think it'll take a lot. Unregistered motor vehicles, I picked on that bylaw enough. All the committees, commissions, the multi-member body, that whole chapter, we can whip through one or two a night pretty easily. Public ways, public ways is easy. Scenic roads is something you need to be aware of and review in depth, which is too bad because it's a long one. Connecting driveways to roads is easy, street names and structure numbers are straightforward. There's no earth removal, stormwater management, yeah, you guys need to, and in fact, I'll bet there are some more things we need to do to that before we bring it.
So could we try and
Good
bang
timing.
out those long ones
First,
first?
yeah,
And then we can, maybe like
Fill
Carrie
it.
said, tack one or two of the other ones on at the end of the meeting?
Yeah.
That way,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, stormwater, and what was the other one?
I think stormwater might need a little bit more time, just, I think a lot's changed, but if we can look at maybe scenic byways, scenic roads,
I got a question for us.
You need to do town council,
yeah.
cause that's radically different,
Is Brittenell a scenic road?
yes. Mhm.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll look at if we can add one or two, maybe we can, CIPC, the bylaw itself is long, but I don't know that there's significant,
The whole committee has vetted it. We've approved it with Peter. So if you have questions, I can answer them, but other than that,
Well,
Right, I
I
mean-
will point out, Harry, that FinCom had also approved the
right,
version of
I was just
FinCom
gonna
that you
say, I
got, so.
think all of our boards and commissions have approved and we've been.
right,
Yeah, we
but,
might get a few anonymous letters about that group after tonight's meeting, so you never know.
Alright, so,
Are there any quick ones you wanna put at the end of Monday's meeting? We don't have a lot so far for the agenda.
maybe, sorry, public,
I think legal affairs chapter, articles 2 through 4 are easy. And all of chapter 5 is easy, so put on as many as you. Cause there's not a lot to do there.
Yep.
And in fact, I don't even know that there's a large value in your taking the time to review them, but I'm not gonna say there isn't. Public consumption though shouldn't be bad.
so we can put a couple on.
Yeah, tack a few on.
Okay, so tentative schedule for the Wednesday, October 11th. And we'll probably determine based on how we get through, what we get through on Monday, I guess, what we look at. Most likely town council will be one of them.
I would submit the next Monday meeting is CIPC and town council.
On Monday's meeting?
This Monday coming.
No, I'm sorry, not this Monday, the following Wednesday, you're right,
Yeah,
is when CIPC, so yeah, I would suggest delinquent taxpayers, unregistered motor vehicles, and all the multi-member bodies ones.
For Monday?
And COM,
Wait, I'm confused. So are you saying to do CIPC and town council for the October 11th meeting?
yes, that's what I meant to say.
This Monday, we're gonna do, or the coming Monday, legal affairs, chapters 2, 3, and 4, and then chapter 5.
Yeah.
As well, okay.
We'll get through as much as we can in that time, but none of those should be highly controversial or difficult.
Never know.
Thanks, Tamika. Thanks. Any other business? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion.
I make a motion to end tonight's meeting.
second,
Alright, I'm just gonna take a roll call.
second I. Paul?
I think you said aye. Ledger aye.
Galvin, aye.
Whitman aye. We're adjourned at 8:03.
Okay.
Thank you all.